Time now for a closer look at this morning's papers, and here with me to review them are the article's columnist Ali Miraj and the anthropologist Marianne Hotter. So welcome back to both of you. Nice to see you again. We've dealt with a number of the front pages in the last hour, but Marianne, you've delved inside the Mail for our first story this hour, haven't you? And this is a message from the Archbishop of Canterbury. So what's his main focus here?
So this is in advance of his New Year address, which he will give tomorrow. And he's going to be talking about how the care system is broken but doesn't have to be. Those are his words. And share, I think, what he describes as a hopeful vision for what care should and could be like. I think this is off the back of a report that he commissioned last year that is due to be published early next year about the title of the report is Care and Support Reimagined. And the principle that the authors have come out and given some initial expectations of what will be in the report. And they're basically saying that you can't tinker around the edges of the care and support system and hope things are going to get better. This needs a kind of a radical revisioning of also how government and kind of statutory support agencies need to work, how you have to get out of this kind of siloed thinking where you've got medical care in one place, you've got care services for adult social care in another place, you've got the legion of, I think it's 9 million unpaid carers in Britain who are picking up most of the weight of this burden, challenge, joy of caring, perhaps. It's not all, it's an incredibly hard job. And I think that we really genuinely need to start making this a political issue that we all talk about, because it's something that affects probably someone, at least one member of every family will be doing unpaid care for adults or children or other vulnerable people. So it's kind of really wonderful, I think, that Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, is going to use his New Year Day address to actually shine some light on this issue and say, this is something that matters to us all. This is something that can potentially bring us together and make society a better place, but we cannot be relying on a system that is chronically underfunded and 9 million people who just don't see how their labour is being appreciated. Their labour for their loved ones, yes, but we shouldn't take it for granted.
Yeah, it's been a challenge for successive governments, hasn't it? And one that's not been fully addressed yet. I think everyone would probably agree with that. Let's move on, Ali, shall we, to a story inside the Express now. And they're focusing on what's happening in Ukraine, and also a suggestion that there's a new body, is there, to look at what weapons might be needed and provided?
Yes, this is a new operations directorate being set up within the Ministry of Defence to procure weapons in short order, because according to the head of this area within the MOD, the conflict is now at a critical crossroads, and you've seen in recent days hundreds of Russian rockets being fired at civilian sites in Ukraine. You had that visit by President Zelensky to the US Congress a few days ago, again asking for more military support. And what this operations directorate is going to do is it's actually going to be bringing in people that procured equipment during the COVID crisis in short order. Now, some of you might be quaking in your boots to hear that, given some of the mismanagement that took place, and there's going to be a COVID inquiry which will hopefully look into some of these issues, and there's an ongoing inquiry into at least one of those cases right now. So it's not the best advertisement, but what is clear is that the UK government has committed another 2.3 billion in support for Ukraine in the coming months. It is going to have to procure this equipment quickly, and it looks like there is no end game to this war right now, which is the thing that really concerns me. I mean, we are paying in two ways for the war, and I fully accept that we need to support the Ukrainians in this. It was a completely beyond the pale invasion by the Russians on February the 24th. But the question is, how long does it go on for? What is the end game? I mean, Zelensky is now talking about pushing the Russians back even from Crimea, which was given up in 2014. Is that really realistic? Ultimately, there will have to be, I suspect, some sort of negotiated settlement. It appears that both sides at the moment are not in that particular place. But I do hope that there's some back-channel diplomacy going on, because we're paying in two ways. One is the additional munitions that we're providing Ukraine, fine. But there's also the huge energy costs, which apparently are coming down to a degree, but we've still got inflation at 10.7%, which is not all down to Ukraine, but it is partly down to Ukraine in terms of the massive spike in energy prices we've seen in the past 12 months. And that needs to be addressed, and it's not going to be addressed until there's a peace settlement of some kind. So that is the bigger question, which I think all sides need to think about. And we need to sort of be putting some pressure on our colleagues in Ukraine, which I think the West has been very reluctant to do up to this point.
Okay, yeah, well, certainly lots of questions as we go into the new year on that and where the situation will head in the coming months. Let's move on, shall we, Marianne, to a story inside The Telegraph about tracking COVID.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. Ali picked out one of the front pages, covered on a number of the front pages, this kind of question around what the COVID status of China is at the moment. They have changed their policy radically from having quite strict lockdowns and a zero COVID policy to a much more open, removing lockdowns, removing travel restrictions, things like that. The big challenge for the rest of the world, perhaps, excluding the 1 billion people who live in China, is the reliability of the statistics that are coming out of China about COVID rates of infection, about the speed of spread, and of course the genomic data that indicates whether we are dealing with a variant that is familiar and known, or whether a subvariant of something we know about, like Omicron, or whether this is a new variant. Now, of course, if it's a new variant, then the scientists need to get to work out what needs to be done, if anything, in terms of how to address and mitigate some of the challenges around that. And one of the things that obviously countries are doing at the moment is introducing testing for travellers coming from China, but that's an individual. Unless you impose very, very large-scale travel restrictions, you won't get any kind of population-level impact on that. All you'll get is a kind of one single point of data. And what the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC in the US, is considering is testing the wastewater that comes off a plane. So this is all the water that goes down the sink when you wash your hands and you go to the all the water that comes out of the toilet. So basically a sample from every single individual on that plane. And of course you can't trace it to a specific individual, but you can get a sample of that 300 or so people from testing the water that has the particles of the viral DNA. I think it's absolutely genius, because if you can extend that, roll that out across every single plane that lands in Heathrow, and not just COVID, but lots of other viruses of interest that you want to kind of keep an eye on, or zoonotic diseases, then suddenly we've got this incredible superpower that is anonymised, but hugely useful for population public health.
Yeah, fascinating. And Ali, very briefly, if you can, inside the Mail, the suggestion that President Putin is trying to get President Xi on board over Ukraine.
Well, yeah, he's calling him dear friend, respected premier. Look, Xi has got his own. He's got his own eye on the future. He's secured a third term as premier. He believes that this war, from what we can tell, is bad for business. He's not really encouraging Putin. He's keeping an arm's length sort of distance. Putin's trying to cozy up. But we'll see what happens in Taiwan, South China Sea.
Indeed. So sorry, out of time. See you in an hour. Thank you.